Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through the crystal corridors of the Galactic Council Station, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the polished floor. The massive structure floated in the neutral space between star systems, a symbol of peace that had lasted for over 3 centuries. Beings from 47 different species worked together here, their various forms of communication translated by advanced neural interfaces. Sarah represented the newest member of the Council, humanity. Earth had been granted membership just 5 years ago after decades of careful observation by Council scouts. The process had been slow and methodical, as it always was when dealing with a species that had only recently developed faster than light travel. The Council chambers stretched out before her like a vast amphitheater. Representatives sat in specially designed pods that accommodated their unique physiologies. The Zalathi floated in their water-filled spheres, their tentacles dancing through the liquid as they communicated through bioluminescent patterns. The Korthak perched on crystalline branches, their insect-like forms perfectly still, except for the occasional twitch of their antennae. The massive Gorvani lounged in reinforced platforms, their rocky hide gleaming under the chamber's soft lighting. "The human delegation requests permission to address the Council," Sarah announced, her voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix. Council leader HFY, a tall, graceful being from the Altarian Collective, gestured with one of her 4 arms. Her species had been among the founders of the Council, and their natural diplomacy had made them excellent mediators. "Permission granted, Ambassador Chen. Please proceed." Sarah took a deep breath. Today's session would determine humanity's role in a growing crisis at the galaxy's edge. The Devourers, a mechanized hive mind, had been consuming star systems for months, turning everything in their path into raw materials for their endless expansion. The Council's response had been measured, diplomatic. They had tried negotiation, economic sanctions, and finally a small peacekeeping force. All had failed. "Honored Council members," Sarah began, "humanity wishes to contribute more substantially to the Devourer crisis. We understand that our military contributions have been limited due to our new membership status, but we believe we can offer unique insights and capabilities." A low rumble came from the Gorvani section. Their representative, Torgan, leaned forward on his platform. "With respect, Ambassador Chen, humanity has been in space for barely a century. Your species shows promise, but this threat requires experience that spans millennia." Sarah had expected this response. Humanity was seen as young, inexperienced, and somewhat primitive by Council standards. Their technology was adequate, but not revolutionary. Their diplomatic corps was small and newly trained. Most importantly, they had never faced a true existential threat as part of the galactic community. The Zalathi representative, Lurami, pulsed soft blue patterns through her sphere's water. The translation came through as musical tones. "The human assessment of the situation would be valuable, but perhaps a support role would be more appropriate. Supply lines, medical assistance, or refugee support." Sarah felt a familiar frustration rise in her chest. It was the same reaction she had seen from her colleagues back on Earth when they received reports from these Council sessions. Humanity was being patted on the head like a child offering to help with adult problems. "We appreciate the Council's protection of newer species," Sarah replied carefully. "However, we believe our perspective might be exactly what's needed. Sometimes fresh eyes can see solutions that experience might overlook." Vexhai's expression remained neutral, but Sarah caught the slight tilting of her head that indicated polite skepticism in Altarian body language. "What specific contributions do you propose, Ambassador?" This was the moment Sarah had been preparing for. She activated her personal display, projecting holographic images into the center of the chamber. The first image showed a detailed analysis of Devourer attack patterns, compiled by Earth's military strategists. Our analysts have identified several weaknesses in devourer tactics, she explained. Their expansion follows predictable patterns based on resource density and strategic positioning. But more importantly, they seem to have difficulty adapting to unconventional strategies. The hologram shifted to show battle footage from recent encounters. Council forces had engaged the Devourers in traditional formation combat, large fleets meeting in open space, trying to overwhelm the enemy through superior numbers and firepower. The results had been devastating for the Council forces. The current approach treats this as a conventional war, Sarah continued. But the Devourers aren't a conventional enemy. They're a hive mind with unlimited resources and no fear of death. Fighting them head-on is exactly what they're designed to counter. Korthak Representative Ziktar's antennae twitched rapidly, a sign of either interest or agitation. What alternative do you suggest? The Council's combined fleets represent the finest military tradition in the galaxy. Sarah hesitated for just a moment. What she was about to propose would sound primitive, even barbaric, to these civilized beings. The Council had spent centuries moving beyond the crude warfare that had once plagued their individual species. Their conflicts were now resolved through negotiation, economic pressure, or, at worst, limited military action with strict rules of engagement. Humans have a different perspective on warfare, she said finally. On our world, we evolved as persistence hunters. We didn't have claws or fangs or natural armor. Instead, we learned to be patient, adaptable, and relentless. We learned to use our environment, to strike from unexpected angles, and to never give up once we committed to a hunt. The chamber fell silent. Several representatives exchanged glances that Sarah couldn't interpret. The concept of persistence hunting was foreign to most council species. They had evolved as either prey animals that relied on speed and camouflage or predators that used overwhelming force in brief encounters. You speak of hunting, Vexhai said carefully. The council has moved beyond such primitive survival strategies. Have you? Sarah asked, and immediately regretted the challenge in her tone. She softened her voice. I don't mean to criticize the council's approach. Peace through civilization is a beautiful achievement. But sometimes, when faced with a threat that doesn't understand civilization, you need to remember older skills. The Gorvani representative made a sound that might have been laughter. Primitive skills against advanced technology? The Devourers have consumed 17 star systems. Their ships repair themselves faster than we can damage them. Sarah nodded. Which is why we shouldn't try to damage them faster than they can repair. We should damage them in ways they can't repair. Target their logistics, their communication networks, their sense of security. Make them afraid to advance because they don't know where the next attack will come from. She changed the holographic display to show a proposed operation. Instead of large fleet engagements, it outlined small, fast strikes against Devourer supply lines, hit-and-run attacks on their mining operations, sabotage missions against their communication relays. Guerrilla warfare, she said, using the human term since no direct translation existed. The art of making a larger, stronger enemy defeat themselves through exhaustion and paranoia. The silence stretched longer this time. Finally, Lurami's sphere pulsed a deep red pattern. This approach seems chaotic, unpredictable. How would you coordinate such diverse attacks without central command? You don't, Sarah replied. Each unit operates independently, making decisions based on local conditions. The enemy can't predict your moves because even you don't know what you'll do until you see the opportunity. Ziktar's antennae went completely still. You're describing anarchy, military chaos. I'm describing adaptation, Sarah countered. The Devourers are a hive mind. They excel at processing information and responding to known threats. But they struggle with true randomness, with opponents who don't follow logical patterns. She pulled up another display, showing theoretical engagement scenarios. Imagine if the Devourers never knew whether their next mining operation would be attacked by stealth fighters, or if their communication relay would simply explode without warning, or if their supply convoy would disappear entirely. They would have to start dedicating resources to defense, to redundancy, to paranoia. Vex-High studied the projections with obvious discomfort. This strategy requires a certain ruthlessness, the ability to strike without warning, to cause fear deliberately. Yes, Sarah admitted, it does. And humanity possesses this ability? Sarah met the council leader's gaze directly. We do, but we also possess the wisdom to use it only when necessary. The chamber erupted in a buzz of interspecies communication. Translators struggled to keep up with the overlapping conversations as representatives discussed this unexpected proposal. Sarah caught fragments, concerns about precedent, questions about human reliability, debates over the ethics of asymmetric warfare. Torgon's voice cut through the chatter. Even if we accepted this approach in principle, it would require council forces to adopt fundamentally different tactics. Our crews are trained for honorable combat, not skulking in shadows. We're not suggesting the entire council fleet change tactics, Sarah replied. We're volunteering to handle this type of operation ourselves. Human ships, human crews, human responsibility. Another wave of discussion swept the chamber. Sarah realized she had just proposed something unprecedented, a single species taking on a major military operation alone, using methods the rest of the council found distasteful. The proposal has merit, Vex-High announced finally, bringing order back to the chamber. But it raises significant concerns. How would the council monitor these operations? How would we ensure they remain within acceptable parameters? Sarah felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. She was walking into territory that could change everything about humanity's relationship with the galaxy. What parameters do you suggest? No attacks on civilian targets, no unnecessary destruction of infrastructure, no actions that could be considered war crimes under council law. Agreed, Sarah said quickly. We're talking about military targets and strategic assets only. Lorami pulsed a questioning pattern. And if your unconventional methods prove insufficient, if the Devourers adapt to your tactics as well? Sarah paused, realizing she was about to cross a line she couldn't uncross. Then we escalate. Humans have other capabilities we haven't discussed yet. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's life support seemed to quiet down. What capabilities? Vex-High asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ones that the council might find unsettling, Sarah replied honestly. But ones that might be necessary if the situation becomes desperate enough? Ziktar stood on his crystalline perch. You speak in riddles, Ambassador. If humanity wishes the council's trust, you must be forthcoming about your intentions. Sarah looked around the chamber at faces both alien and concerned. These beings had built a civilization based on cooperation, understanding, and measured response. They had never needed to awaken the darker aspects of survival that still lurked in humanity's genetic memory. The capabilities I'm referring to, she said slowly, are the ones that got humanity to the top of Earth's food chain despite being smaller and weaker than most of our competitors. We learned to think like our prey, to anticipate their moves, to be more cunning and persistent than anything else on our planet. She paused, knowing her next words would change everything. When humans decide something needs to die, we don't stop until it's dead. We don't take prisoners. We don't show mercy. We don't quit because the enemy is stronger or smarter or better equipped. We just keep coming, keep adapting, keep learning, until the threat is eliminated. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah realized she had just revealed something about humanity that the Council's careful observations had never detected. In their peaceful interaction with humans over the past decades, they had only seen civilization. They had never seen the predator that civilization was built on top of. HFY finally spoke, her voice carefully controlled. "The Council will consider your proposal. We will reconvene in 3 standard days to discuss our decision." As representatives began filing out of the chamber, Sarah remained at her podium, watching them leave. She caught several beings looking back at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Fear, curiosity, concern. She had opened a door today that might never be closed again. The Council was about to see what humans were really capable of when they stopped pretending to be civilized and remembered what they really were. The 3-day wait was about to begin, but Sarah suspected the real countdown had already started. Soon, the galaxy would witness what happened when humanity's full predator mode awakened. 3 weeks later, Commander Marcus Webb crouched in the maintenance shaft of a Devourer mining station, watching his breath fog in the recycled air. His tactical suit's display showed 17 hostile signatures in the corridor below, their mechanical forms moving in perfect synchronization as they processed raw ore from a conquered planet. The station hung in the shadow of what had once been Kepler 442b, a thriving colony world that housed 12 million Zalathi civilians. Now it was a stripped husk, its surface carved into geometric patterns by Devourer extraction machines. The civilians were gone, either evacuated or consumed, depending on how fast they had moved when the invasion began. Webb's team of 6 human operatives had been inside the station for 48 hours, moving through ventilation systems and maintenance tunnels that the Devourers had never bothered to properly secure. The mechanized hive mind was efficient, but it thought like a machine. It protected valuable assets and critical systems, but ignored spaces too small for their units to navigate effectively. Humans, unfortunately for the Devourers, were excellent at fitting into small spaces. "Phoenix Team report," Webb whispered into his comm unit. "Phoenix 2 here," came the reply from Sergeant Lisa Park, positioned near the station's power core. "Charges set. Ready to paint this place black." "Phoenix 3," reported Lieutenant James Rodriguez from the communications array. "Their quantum entanglement network is more sophisticated than expected, but I've found the weak points. Can cut their connection to the hive mind for approximately 15 minutes before they reroute." Webb smiled grimly. 15 minutes was an eternity in their line of work. "Phoenix 4? Demolition's ready," came the crisp voice of Corporal Sarah Kim. "Their manufacturing bay is about to have a very bad day." The plan was simple in concept, nightmarishly complex in execution. Webb's team would simultaneously destroy the station's power core, communications array, manufacturing capabilities, and mining equipment. But they wouldn't just blow things up and leave. They would disappear completely, making it look like the station had experienced catastrophic system failures. The Devourers would waste precious time trying to figure out what had gone wrong, running diagnostics and system checks instead of immediately rebuilding. More importantly, they would start to doubt the reliability of their own technology. A hive mind that couldn't trust its tools was a hive mind with a critical vulnerability. "Phoenix 5 and 6? Webb asked. "We're in position at the ore processing center," replied Staff Sergeant Michael Chen. "Their entire 3-day yield is about to become very expensive space debris." Webb checked his chronometer. "Execute in 30 seconds. Remember, ghosts leave no traces." What followed was a masterpiece of coordinated destruction that would have been impossible for any traditional military force. Webb's team had spent weeks studying Devourer technology, learning their systems, understanding their limitations. They struck with surgical precision, each explosion triggered to look like an internal malfunction rather than sabotage. The station's lights flickered and died as Park's charges turned the power core into molten slag. Rodriguez's virus crashed the communications array while making it appear that a quantum fluctuation had destabilized the entire network. Kim's explosives shredded the manufacturing bay's delicate assembly mechanisms, but only after she had subtly altered the station's maintenance logs to suggest mechanical fatigue. Webb watched through his scope as Devourer units frantically tried to understand what was happening to their station. Their mechanical precision became a liability as they ran the same diagnostic routines over and over, unable to accept that they were under attack because their sensors detected no enemies. By the time the Devourers realized they had been infiltrated, Phoenix Team was already 3 light hours away, their stealth ship hidden in the electromagnetic shadow of a gas giant. Back at the Galactic Council Station, the reports of human operations were causing considerable unrest among the member species. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in a private meeting with Council Leader Vex High, trying to explain tactics that had no equivalent in civilized warfare. "Your people destroyed an entire mining station without being detected," Vex High said, her forearms gesturing in patterns that indicated deep confusion. "The Devourers don't even know they were attacked. How is this possible?" Sarah pulled up tactical reports on her personal display. Commander Webb's team spent 2 weeks studying that specific station. They learned its routines, its weaknesses, its blind spots. When they finally struck, they didn't fight the Devourers. They turned the station's systems against itself. But the precision required... Vex High shook her head. "Our best military analysts estimate that operation had less than a 12% chance of success." "Human special forces don't think in terms of success percentages," Sarah replied. "They think in terms of completing the mission. The odds are just obstacles to overcome." Vex High studied the holographic display showing the destroyed station. "Your Commander Webb's report mentions ghost protocols and psychological warfare. These concepts are unfamiliar to us." Sarah hesitated. She was walking a fine line between explaining human capabilities and revealing just how different humanity really was from the rest of the Council. "Ghost protocols mean leaving no trace of our presence. The enemy should think they're experiencing equipment failures, not enemy action. It makes them doubt their own systems and waste resources on unnecessary repairs and diagnostics." "And psychological warfare?" "Making the enemy afraid," Sarah said simply. "Not afraid of death. The Devourers don't fear death, but afraid of the unknown. Afraid that their technology might fail at any moment. Afraid that they're not as invulnerable as they thought." Vex High's expression grew troubled. "This approach seems to rely on deception and fear. The Council has moved beyond such primitive emotional manipulation." "Perhaps," Sarah agreed. "But the Devourers haven't. They're still machines driven by algorithms and probability calculations. Introduce enough chaos into their system, and they start making mistakes." A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Vex High activated her communication array, and the 3-dimensional image of Zalathi representative Lurami appeared in the space between them. "Council Leader." Lurami's bioluminescent patterns pulsed urgent orange. "I must report a disturbing development. Our intelligence networks are detecting unusual Devourer behavior patterns." "Explain," Vex High commanded. 3 more mining operations have experienced catastrophic system failures in the past week. No 2 failures were the same. Power cores melting down, manufacturing equipment jamming, ore processors exploding. The Devourers are beginning to divert significant resources to system redundancy and security protocols. Vex High glanced at Sarah. "I assume this is the result of additional human operations?" Sarah nodded. 7 teams are currently active in Devourer territory. Each one operates independently, using different tactics and targeting different vulnerabilities. The goal is to make the Devourers paranoid about their own technology. "It's working too well," Lurami's patterns shifted to deep red. Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting massive Devourer fleet movements. They're consolidating their forces and pulling back from several star systems. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Pulling back to where? Unknown, but the concentration of ships is unprecedented. Whatever they're planning, it will be their largest operation yet. Vexhai stood, her graceful form tense with concern. Ambassador Chen, I need to ask you a direct question. Are your people prepared for the possibility that these tactics might provoke a more aggressive response from the Devourers? Sarah met her gaze steadily. That's exactly what we're hoping for. The silence that followed was profound. Lurami's bioluminescent patterns went completely dark for several seconds before flashing rapid, confused sequences. You want them to become more aggressive? Vexhai asked carefully. We want them to make a mistake, Sarah replied. Right now, the Devourers are patient and methodical. They take their time, consolidate their positions, and only advance when they're certain of victory. That makes them nearly impossible to defeat through conventional means. She activated her display, showing tactical projections that had been developed by Earth's military strategists. But if we can make them angry, make them frustrated, make them desperate to end this harassment campaign, they might abandon their careful approach and come after us directly. And then? Then we find out what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, Sarah said quietly. The Devourers think they're the apex predators of the galaxy. They've never encountered anything that could match their aggression and persistence. Vexhai sank back into her chair. You're talking about deliberately provoking a total war scenario. We're talking about ending this conflict once and for all, Sarah corrected. The current situation can only end in two ways. Either the Devourers consume the entire galaxy, or something stops them permanently. There's no middle ground with a hive mind that converts everything it touches into more of itself. Lurami's patterns shifted to a pale blue that indicated fear. But if you're wrong about human capabilities, if you can't match their aggression, then the galaxy falls anyway, Sarah finished. At least this way, we go down fighting instead of being slowly consumed one system at a time. Another priority message arrived. This one from Gorvani Space. Torgon's massive form filled the holographic display, his rocky hide scarred from what looked like recent combat. Council leader, he rumbled, I must report first-hand observations of human military capabilities. My flagship encountered a Devourer scout force 3 days ago. We were outgunned and preparing to withdraw when a single human vessel appeared. Vexhai leaned forward. A single ship. The UES Persistence, Torgon confirmed. Destroyer-class vessel with standard armament. It engaged 12 Devourer ships simultaneously and emerged victorious with minimal damage. Sarah felt a spike of concern. The Persistence wasn't supposed to be engaging in direct combat. Their mission was reconnaissance and data gathering. How is this possible? Lurami asked. Torgon's expression was unreadable, but his tone suggested deep unease. They didn't fight like any species I've ever observed. Instead of maintaining formation and trading fire, they moved like a living creature. Unpredictable, adaptive, relentless. They took damage that should have disabled their ship and kept fighting. When their primary weapons were damaged, they rammed the enemy vessels. Ramming attacks? Vexhai's voice rose in shock. That's suicide. That's what I thought, Torgon agreed. But their ship was designed for it. Reinforced hull, redundant systems, damage control protocols I've never seen before. They turned their vessel into a weapon and used it to destroy enemies 3 times their size. Sarah closed her eyes. Captain Morrison and the crew of the Persistence had gone off script, abandoning their reconnaissance mission to save Gorvani lives. It was a perfectly human response to seeing allies in danger, but it revealed capabilities that humanity hadn't been ready to discuss yet. The strangest part, Torgon continued, was their communication during the battle. They weren't transmitting tactical data or coordinating maneuvers. They were laughing. Laughing? Vexhai repeated weakly. Combat laughter, joy in battle. They were enjoying themselves while fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds. Torgun paused. Council leader, I've been a warrior for over 3 centuries. I've never seen anything like what I witnessed from that human crew. The holographic display flickered as Torgun ended the transmission, leaving the 3 beings in uncomfortable silence. Ambassador Chen, Vexhai said finally, I think it's time for complete honesty. What exactly are we unleashing when we allow humanity to operate without restrictions? Sarah looked at both alien representatives, these civilized beings who had spent centuries building a galaxy based on cooperation and understanding. They were about to discover that some problems couldn't be solved with diplomacy and measured response. You're unleashing evolution, she said quietly. Hundreds of thousands of years of survival instincts that turned a weak, slow species into the most dangerous predator on Earth. We learned to hunt in packs, to use tools, to adapt to any environment. Most importantly, we learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to become more dangerous than whatever's trying to kill you. Vexhai's 4 hands trembled slightly. And you believe this is necessary? The Devourers have consumed 17 star systems and show no signs of stopping, Sarah replied. Billions of sentient beings have died or fled before their advance. The Council's peaceful approach has failed completely. She stood, her expression hardening into something that made both aliens instinctively step back. So yes, it's time to stop being civilized. It's time to remember that civilization is a luxury you can only afford when you're safe. When you're not safe, when something is trying to wipe out everything you care about, you do whatever it takes to survive. Sarah looked directly at Vexhai. The Council is about to learn what happens when humans decide that something needs to die. And I pray to whatever gods are listening that we're strong enough to win, because if we're not, there won't be anyone left to remember that we tried. The meeting ended with more questions than answers, but one thing had become clear. Humanity was no longer hiding what they really were. The galaxy was about to witness the full scope of human warfare, and even Sarah wasn't entirely certain what that would look like. In the depths of space, the Devourers were consolidating their forces for a massive counterstrike against the persistent harassment they couldn't understand or predict. They had calculated that overwhelming force applied to the source of the problem would restore order to their expansion. They had no idea that overwhelming force was exactly what humanity had been waiting for. And she wasn't entirely sure the Council was ready for that revelation. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Predator, watching the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled emerge from hyperspace. 2,000 ships of various classes, from nimble scouts to massive dreadnoughts, arranged themselves in perfect geometric formations against the star field. Their hulls gleamed with the metallic efficiency of purpose-built killing machines. Contact from the Council flagship, reported Communications Officer Torres. They're requesting immediate conference with Human Command. Elena nodded grimly. Put them through. The main display filled with the image of Council Leader Vexhai, surrounded by representatives from every major species. Their expressions ranged from concern to barely concealed terror as they watched the Devourer fleet complete its deployment. Admiral Vasquez, Vexhai began, her usually calm voice strained. The Devourer force is beyond anything we anticipated. Our combined fleets number only 400 ships. We must withdraw immediately and request reinforcements. Negative, Council Leader, Elena replied. This is exactly what we've been working toward. The Devourers have finally abandoned their patient expansion strategy and committed everything to one decisive battle. Lorami's bioluminescent patterns flashed panicked orange. Admiral, your harassment tactics have succeeded too well. They've brought their entire military might to bear. This isn't a battle. It's extinction. Elena activated her tactical display, showing the disposition of human forces. 43 ships, mostly destroyers and cruisers, with a handful of the new Dreadnought-class vessels. By any rational calculation, they were hopelessly outnumbered. Respectfully, representatives, this is why the Council has never defeated the Devourers, Elena said. You see numbers and think in terms of conventional warfare. 2,000 versus 400 looks like certain defeat to you? Because it is. Torgon's voice rumbled from his section of the display. Even with the unusual tactics your species has demonstrated, these odds are impossible. Elena smiled, and something in that expression made several council representatives visibly recoil. You're thinking like prey. When a wolf pack hunts a herd of buffalo, they don't count the numbers and retreat because they're outnumbered 50-1. They identify the weakness, coordinate their attack, and bring down their target. What weakness? Vexhai demanded. The Devourers are a hive mind with perfect coordination and overwhelming firepower. Their weakness is that they're a hive mind, Elena replied. Cut off the head, and the body dies. Disrupt their command structure, and 2,000 ships become 2,000 individual units operating on outdated orders. She changed the tactical display to show deep penetration routes through the Devourer formation. Human forces will execute a focused assault on their command vessels, will punch through their perimeter, destroy their coordination network, and leave them vulnerable to the Council fleet's superior firepower. Korthak Representative Ziktar's antennae twitched rapidly. Even if such an assault were possible, it would require passing through concentrated fire from hundreds of enemy vessels. Your ships would be destroyed before they reached their targets. Some of them, yes, Elena agreed calmly. War has costs. The casual acceptance of massive casualties sent a visible shudder through the council representatives. These beings had spent centuries avoiding conflicts that might result in significant loss of life. The idea of deliberately sacrificing ships and crews for tactical advantage was fundamentally alien to their thinking. Admiral, Vexhai said carefully, I must ask, are you certain your people understand what they're volunteering for? Elena's smile widened. Council leader, every human on these ships volunteered specifically for this mission. They know exactly what we're asking of them. She opened a comm channel to the human fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez. The enemy has assembled exactly the force we hoped they would. They think numbers will save them. They think overwhelming firepower will end this war. They're about to learn why apex predators don't hunt in straight lines. The response from her captains was immediate and chilling. 43 voices raised in a battle cry that had echoed through human history from ancient battlefields to the stars themselves. The translation matrix struggled to convey the meaning to the council representatives, but the raw emotion came through clearly. By your command, Admiral, came the collective reply. Let's show them what humans do. Elena turned back to the council display. Representatives, I suggest your ships maintain current position and prepare to exploit the chaos we're about to create. And whatever you see in the next hour, remember that we're still the same species you've been working with for the past 5 years. The Devourer fleet began its advance, moving with mechanical precision in a formation designed to maximize overlapping fields of fire. Their strategy was simple: overwhelming force applied uniformly across the battle space. They had calculated that no enemy could survive the concentrated firepower of 2,000 ships. They had never fought humans before. Elena's fleet scattered like a school of fish, startled by a predator, abandoning all pretense of formation flying. Instead of meeting the Devourer advance head-on, human ships dispersed across 3 dimensions, using their superior maneuverability to avoid direct confrontation while closing the distance. Predator Squadron, execute Broken Arrow, Elena commanded. 12 human destroyers suddenly accelerated toward the center of the Devourer formation, their engines pushed far beyond safety limits. Devourer fire converged on them immediately, burning through shields and armor with ruthless efficiency. But the destroyers kept coming, their crews making micro-adjustments that turned what should have been fatal hits into glancing blows. "What are they doing?" Vexhai whispered as she watched ships take damage that should have destroyed them and somehow keep fighting. "Persistence hunting," Elena replied. "Human ships aren't just vehicles, they're weapons. Every system is designed with one question in mind. How do we keep fighting when everything goes wrong?" The first destroyer, UES Relentless, lost its primary weapons, half its engine power, and most of its forward armor. Instead of withdrawing for repairs, it redirected all remaining power to engines and rammed straight through a Devourer cruiser, its reinforced hull tearing the enemy ship in half. "They're using their own ships as projectiles," Larami's patterns flashed in horrified fascination. "Kinetic kill vehicles," Elena confirmed. "When you can't win a gun battle, you turn yourself into the gun." But the ramming attacks were just the opening move. While Devourer attention focused on the seemingly suicidal destroyers, human cruisers had been maneuvering through the chaos, using the debris field and energy discharges to mask their approach. "Go, Squadron, you are weapons-free," Elena announced. 8 ships that the Devourers had lost track of suddenly appeared within their formation, having approached from the blind spots created by their own destroyed comrades. They opened fire at point-blank range, their weapons specifically designed to penetrate Devourer armor at close quarters. The Devourer response was immediate and devastating. Dozens of ships turned their weapons on the infiltrating cruisers, determined to eliminate the threat. But that was exactly what Elena had been counting on. "Phoenix Squadron, commence the hunt." The remaining human ships, no longer facing the full attention of the Devourer fleet, accelerated toward the enemy command vessels. They moved with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic, each captain anticipating their comrades' moves and flowing around obstacles like a pack of wolves circling their prey. "Impossible," Torgon muttered as he watched human ships thread through gaps in the Devourer formation that shouldn't have existed. "Their pilots are flying beyond the limits of their technology." "They're flying beyond the limits of sanity," Elena corrected. "Human pilots don't just operate their ships, they become their ships. The difference between what's possible and what's necessary disappears when survival is on the line." The UES Berserker, a heavy cruiser under the command of Captain Sarah Kim, punched through the Devourer perimeter with engines so overcharged that they left a trail of plasma behind her. She absorbed fire from 6 different ships, her armor ablating away in sheets of superheated metal, and kept accelerating. "Berserker to Admiral," Kim's voice crackled with static. "Primary target acquired. Beginning final approach. Confirmed, Berserker. Make it count." Elena watched as Kim's ship, now more debris than vessel, aligned itself with the massive Devourer command ship. The enemy vessel was 10 times larger, bristling with weapons, protected by shields that could absorb the firepower of entire fleets. None of it mattered. The Berserker's final transmission was simple. "For humanity." The cruiser struck the command ship at nearly 15% of light speed, its mass converted to pure kinetic energy. The explosion that followed was visible across the entire star system, a brief new star that outshone the local sun for several seconds. When the light faded, the Devourer command ship was gone, and with it, the coordinated intelligence that had been directing 2,000 individual vessels. "Now," Elena commanded. The Council fleet, which had been holding back in horror at the human tactics, suddenly found themselves facing a Devourer force that had lost its unity. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination began drifting, their crews waiting for orders that would never come. "All Council vessels," Elena broadcast, "the enemy is vulnerable. Attack at will! What followed wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. Devourer ships, cut off from their hive mind and operating on outdated tactical programs, couldn't adapt to the Council fleet's coordinated assault. Within 2 hours, the largest devourer force ever assembled was nothing but wreckage and expanding debris fields. The cost had been severe. Of Elena's 43 ships, only 18 remained combat effective. Hundreds of human crew members had died. Their ships turned into weapons in humanity's first real demonstration of their military philosophy, but the war was over. On the Council station, the representatives sat in stunned silence as damage reports and casualty figures scrolled across their displays. The victory was complete and absolute, but the methods used to achieve it had shaken their understanding of what civilized warfare should look like. Ambassador Chen, Vexhai said finally, I need to understand what the Council just witnessed. Your people deliberately sacrificed their lives to achieve victory. Sarah nodded solemnly. They volunteered for the mission knowing the odds. Every human who died today made that choice freely. But why? Lurami's patterns shifted through confused blues and purples. Why would rational beings choose certain death? Because the alternative was worse, Sarah replied. The Devourers would have consumed the entire galaxy if they weren't stopped. Our people decided that their individual lives were worth less than the survival of every species in Council space. Ziktar's antennae went completely still. Your species values collective survival over individual preservation. When necessary, Sarah confirmed, we prefer to find solutions that save everyone. But when that's not possible, we choose the option that saves the most people. Torgan's image reappeared on the display, his rocky features scarred from the battle. Ambassador, my species has always prided itself on courage in battle. But what your people demonstrated today, it goes beyond courage. It's something else entirely. It's what happens when you corner a predator, Sarah said quietly. Most species fight to survive. Humans fight to win. The difference is that we're willing to pay any price necessary for victory. Vexhai stood slowly, her graceful form somehow diminished by what she had witnessed. The Council owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. Your species has saved us all. No, Sarah replied, shaking her head. We've reminded you that civilization is something worth protecting. Sometimes that protection requires you to remember where you came from, what you had to survive to become civilized in the first place. She activated her display one final time, showing an image of Earth from space, a blue marble suspended in the void, beautiful and fragile. Every human ship that died today was crewed by beings who looked at this image and decided it was worth dying for. Not just Earth, but what Earth represents. The possibility that consciousness can create something better than the darkness between the stars. The Council chamber fell silent as representatives absorbed the magnitude of what had transpired. They had witnessed the awakening of humanity's full predator mode, and it had been both terrible and magnificent. What happens now? Vexhai asked. Now we rebuild, Sarah replied. We mourn our dead, we help the survivors, and we work together to make sure nothing like the Devourers ever threatens the galaxy again. She paused, considering her next words carefully. But the Council should understand something important. What you saw today was humanity at war. We prefer peace. We value cooperation, and we work toward understanding whenever possible. But when something threatens our pack, and that now includes every species in Council space, we become something else entirely. And if such a threat arises again? Torgan asked. Sarah's expression hardened into something that reminded every representative why their species had once feared the dark. Then the galaxy will discover that the Devourers were just the first enemy to learn what happens when humans decide something needs to die. We don't stop. We don't quit. We don't show mercy. We hunt until the threat is eliminated, no matter what the cost." The meeting ended with that promise hanging in the air, a reminder that the peaceful humans the Council had grown comfortable with were just one face of a much more complex species. They had witnessed humanity's full predator mode, and while it had saved them all, it had also fundamentally changed their understanding of what their newest members were truly capable of. In the depths of space, the wreckage of 2,000 Devourer ships drifted slowly toward the system's star, a monument to the day the galaxy learned that some prey animals are actually sleeping predators. And humanity had just woken up.